Hi and welcome to MoCDA Talk Series. We're in conversation with artist duo Dejha T and Ania Catherine. Listen to how Los Angeles-based duo merge cutting-edge technology and immersive experiences. In their work, Ania and Dejha challenge the audience perceptions while experimenting on the influence that new technologies play on the human body and mind. Enjoy the talk.
Hey, there we go. How you doing, guys?
Good, and you?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad.
Just wanted to give your audience some time with you alone.
Yeah, it's taking time to adapt to the new situation, you know.
Yes.
And it feels like food is the primary objective of my day.
Yeah,
Doing some food.
Wow. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. But yeah, you guys look good. It's nice to have you. Here.
We're not dressing up that much these days, so we're like, maybe we'll take this moment.
Thanks for giving us an excuse
to get dressed up.
Yeah, you know, you only see these, but I'm actually wearing a pajama. Kidding, but yeah. Okay.
Wait, you're
so
wearing a what?
might
You
have
cut
some-
out for a second. You cut
I
out for a
struggle to
second.
hear you guys. I think we might have some connection issues.
Hopefully not. Is our video stuttering as well?
Okay, I can see you now and I can hear you better. But
You
yeah,
can hear us better?
the audio was a bit cracking, so.
All right. Let's see now. Can you hear us okay now?
Yeah,
No.
I can hear you. The video is not so great, but I think we can try. Yeah, I'm having some issues with, I don't know whether it's my internet or the internet, but it doesn't seem to be working, so I might have to. I know there's so many people going on the internet these days, so we're just gonna try and go live again. I think we're overwhelming the internet. Okay.
Is that
Hey.
better?
We were getting off of Wi-Fi and onto our regular signal. Hopefully that helps.
Okay, sure.
Are you able to hear us? You're crystal clear on our end.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
I'm just gonna lower my volume so that it doesn't feel too loud.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay. Thank you, Edward, for checking on the sound.
We're crowdsourcing sound quality. Love it. It's the future.
Virtual sound engineer.
I think there's so many people these days being online and connected through Instagram and other platforms that, you know, I was saying that we are actually really challenging the internet these days.
Yes, we are.
How are you both? How have you been doing? How has it been, you know, living through COVID-19?
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky that our everyday life isn't actually that different than how it normally is. Most of our projects, we spend several months just in the studio, us two coming up with the concept, and the only time we're ever really in front of people or in crowds of people or involving several people coming together at once is when we're building, when something is live, or if we're at a speaking engagement, of course, like a conference or a festival or something. But our day-to-day life is actually a lot of just Dejha and I working on projects at home, so it doesn't feel super different, unlike I think a lot of other people's realities are vastly changed by the scenario.
Yeah. I mean, which is an extreme privilege.
Yeah.
I think that's all to say, to point to that. And, you know, of course, it's impacted us, you know, with projects being postponed. All of our speaking has been canceled. We are now interfacing, you know, with institute like MoCDA, now just virtually instead of, you know, being live in a physical space. But yeah, like Ania said, it's a very privileged, like everything you just described is something that a lot of people aren't experiencing.
Yeah.
So but yeah, our day to day is still more or less the same in terms of working, but of course things have been postponed and such. We were to go live with a commission by ADO, the design space in Brooklyn, NYC, and that was supposed to go live in April. It was curated by Alter Projects, and we have had such a wonderful time working with them. But we, you know, all in the same week, we were supposed to be at a symposium at UCSD, like a tech symposium, that got canceled. 2 days later, you know, the commission got pushed back to a later date. Nothing is, you know, formally scheduled, and you know, it kind of was a domino effect from there, and everyone is experiencing the same thing, you know, especially in the experiential world, you know, where the medium is very much relies on the physicality of being somewhere and being physically present. You know, it's been interesting for us to think about, you know, how we will shape and ourselves to fit the new context. And one thing that was interesting specifically with the commission that we're working on with ADO currently and Alter Projects is that we designed a piece that was meant to be pre-COVID. And
like it fit the world pre-COVID. So we had to work on it and design it. It was supposed to open in April. And then when we were thinking about, okay, we're just going to push this back a few months. And then we were looking at how things were so rapidly changing, and all the tragedy and all of the loss, and just being like, the world is not going to be the same when this is over as it was. Like, we were creating for one world, but then realizing that like in 4 months, 10 months, a year and a half, whenever things kind of resume back to normal and we're going to public spaces, it's going to be opening in a completely different world than we had created it in. So we're like, we need to create to fit the new kind of norm, or to help society heal from the wounds that it's going to experience through this, and try to use art as a way to be part of the healing process for societies all over the world that are, I think, gonna probably lose their way of life as they knew it due to this. So it's kind of, it feels like a bigger task, and something we're taking very seriously, that the world is going to be different, and our art and what we're asking people to do, and what the kind of experiences that we want people to have with what we make, need to consider how the world is changing right now.
Yeah, I mean, and that piece particular, the initial concept was very much around our relationship with technology, in how we use it in everyday communications, and how often it can be a very shallow, or allow for shallow interactions, and so many of them that it could fill the time and space that's needed to really develop and nurture more in-depth relationships, and invest in sort of the inner voice, the self, you know, all the sort of self-improvement, and that is something was interesting, because we were saying we used to have to carve out time to do something. Now we have to carve out time to do nothing. That was, if we had a tagline for the concept, that would be it. And so that isn't appropriate anymore. So, you know, that is one way that it has really impacted work immediately for us, projects that we're working on, how we think of work, you know. And to be honest, it's going to really depend on when projects open, like, because we don't know, contexts are going to continue to change. Even if we knew something was opening in August, if it even could, how are we to know what we should be presenting then? You know,
to what world are we creating?
To what world?
And how has it affected, I mean, with MoCDA being a digital museum, not having a physical location, are you kind of like, this is perfect because we don't rely on people coming to anywhere?
I mean, it's not a perfect situation anyway, but in a way, you know, we do acknowledge the fact that, sorry, I can hear an echo. I might just put the headset on, because I can hear the audio coming back. So it's not an ideal situation, but in a way, I think museums and institutions that have dealt with technology before is not too far to adapt to a reality that has a heavier use of technology. Although it does, put you in a lot of constraints, because of course you're unable to meet with people, so you need to rethink and reshape the way you were thinking about creating not just online shows, but sharing also that content and being mindful about mental health. The fact that people may be in a different state, so they may perceive things through the internet even more louder, so if you were using the internet and the online space as something that wanted to portray a certain reality, given the circumstances, you may need to rethink through that space. I'm just going to put the headset on.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope the audio is better now.
We
can hear you fine.
Yeah. Are we still echoing?
I don't know, I'm just checking with people listening to us. I hope it's fine.
Is that better? Woo!
Edward, our
Thank you,
sound
Edward.
engineer.
What is it saying? Okay, better. Great.
Okay.
Good. Sorry about that.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So yes, I wanted to sort of follow up on this point, checking with you, how do you think technology should play? What kind of role technology do you feel should take in future performances, and on the work that you've been doing, and the role that technology played in your performances, how do you see that going in the future?
In terms of a method or venue of what that looks like in practice, or what the final product is it physical or not, or our approach to technology?
I think I'm more interested in learning from you. How do you see the experience with the audience, whether it's online or offline? How do you see the audience sort of interacting with technology now that through these times everyone had to connect through devices, for example, and so the opinion that we had on technology, for example, and on all the CCTV and controlling of technology on humans had left on us before the COVID, and what's going to be like after, when we actually see technology as something that is helping humans to protect them. So perhaps our vision on technology has shifted towards something that is less invasive and is actually more protective.
Yeah. Well, should I start?
Yeah.
So
we've been thinking about this a lot.
Yeah, before we get into how we use technology in the work, I think the question and what you were just discussing about, is the technology something that's going to be protecting us, or is it something that's going to be something that we're servicing? Something that we're providing data, we're providing information that helps the tech companies and surveillance capitalists who are benefiting from products of convenience. I think currently, or up until this point, we have had almost every technology service that we would use on a day-to-day basis provides us more convenience, allows us to live our lives in an easier fashion, but maybe not necessarily in the right ways, right? It's not helping, getting through traffic quicker, okay, but it's still a luxury, right? That you even have a car, you even have a job to go to. So that's like a convenience, a convenience sort of product as well. Anything from how to, go grocery shopping without physically being in a store, and Instacart, any services that are provided that are free from the main tech companies, you have to ask the question, what are we giving to those companies? And it's not just giving up your privacy, like, oh, well, I have nothing to hide, but it's that you're actually training systems, and we're all collectively training systems and providing information to allow our behaviors to be more certain and more predictable, so that, you know, the opportunity to sell and make a profit, they're called, you know, surveillance dividends, right? Where people are making money about being certain about our actions and our future actions. And so that has, you know, in terms of the climate of technology, we've really seen technology used in that way. So it's not protecting us. We're not in control of our data. We're not in control of when we're using all of these free services or low-cost services that provide us a lot of convenience, provide us sort of connection that we have. You know, that is something we're paying a price for, and it's not just to say, oh, I have nothing to hide. You know, that information is used in a very particular way to make a profit and to, you know, put the power on the technology product side and less on the user side. But that is to say too, and do you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a good summary of, I think, where we have been. And I think what we've been discussing a lot is that was when products were more for convenience or for a luxury or for like something fun. But what happens when all of a sudden we're not able to meet in person and we're not able to be together physically is that these products go from being just a kind of like luxury or something fun to an absolute necessity, the only way that you can connect to people. Which it's beautiful that we have all these ways of connecting with people all around the world, maybe family members that you don't know if you're ever going to see again. You can look at them in the face. Like there is value to that. But at the same time, when we're completely reliant on that, there's no other opportunities of connecting with people. Then the opportunity for exploitation is also much higher. If all of a sudden everyone had to pay to use the services that we are now relying on just to talk to people, everyone would probably be forced to pay it because we don't have any other alternatives. We can't meet up with someone for a coffee or in the park or something like that. So that is, I think, one side of it. And the other one is what we were talking about, is it becoming, basically we're seeing technology as not something so frivolous or something fun or like we can explore, but more like maybe we need to start looking at the capabilities of technology as a tool that can help change and like solve real world problems and like bring, like, instead of being to do something cool, it's like, how can we solve major crises? How can we use technology and stop putting it towards things that are just kind of for fun? I mean, fun is good, but we also, I think, need to take seriously that we can use these capabilities to do things that will help improve the lives of people all over the world. And that's something that I think will come out of this. Like, maybe we need to get more serious with how we're exploring with technology and really solve problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I, was thinking as you were talking about the role of technology is perhaps, I don't know, the data that is being collected during these days, because there's, of course, a huge amount of data. What are companies going to do with it? Because a lot of companies are probably going to fail in the near future because a lot of business models were based on something that no longer works, or at least, the current system proved that a lot of economies couldn't really be sustainable in situations like the one that we're currently experiencing. So I'm thinking all the data that is being collected these days, how do you think, or how would you, your vision on the future, what do you think technology would look like in terms of what is being collected as a statement of the behaviors that people are showing towards social media platforms, for example, in the future, and how would these perform in art, how these behaviors that we are collectively showing towards new media and social media and technology more in general will be presented in the future through what is being collected so far in terms of the human behaviors. Because I think also our behaviors have changed as well, you know, or are in progress of changing and shifting towards something that is approaching technology as a need, and not as something that pleasure us, you know, in a way, not as a nice to have, but actually as a must have.
Yeah. I mean, I would actually really like to hear Shoshana Zuvlov's answer to a question like this.
I know, she's probably like, they're having a field day. People are giving us more data than ever before. One thing on the last question I just wanted to add that I think is a plus, which is, I think before, from my perspective, I don't know everyone's intentions with going online and using social services, but it feels like there has been a larger shift away from how can I use the internet to promote myself or my projects. And I have so many friends who are now like just feeling this sort of solidarity with like, I'm going to offer a free like pottery class, or like I'm going to do a free ballet class to give everyone around the world, if they have access to a live feed, that I can teach them a ballet class. Like this idea that like maybe we can use the internet to use our skills to spread joy, or like give them some nice moment to people around the world that you don't know, which usually would be like, what can I get from this, or something. And it's become more like, what can I offer the world through technology? And I think that's something that's really nice that I've never seen before, or maybe not in my circles. Like I said, I don't know the entirety, but that's something I've never seen that I've noticed that I think gives me a lot of hope for technology, that it becomes a place where people are more sharing for the benefit of everyone else instead of just for the benefit of themselves or their product or their brand.
Yeah,
or
totally. I agree.
I wonder how that's going to affect like influencer culture, because like when I think about what you're saying, it hit me, the idea of me, the idea of individualism, the idea of promoting a brand, promoting, you know, your brand, your project, or your personal narrative has quickly become more about checking in with people, more about, you know, our friend Becca in Milan, like saying, this is my firsthand experience. You don't, you know, the news, there's so many sources in which we can, you know, gain information from. But when it's your friend, you know, in Milan experiencing a day-to-day basis, and she's providing an account, that has an entirely different effect than a live stream from a major news platform.
Right.
And so I think it's interesting, like, and her intention being like, this is how we're doing this, you know, and my friends in the US, this is what it's going to look like in a couple of weeks, you know, going to the store 6 feet apart. And we're like, wow. And then, you know,
3 weeks later, same thing.
Like here today, that's what it would be like to go to the store. So, like you're saying, using the tools to create more infrastructure for everyone to be a bit more equalized. But, you know, that also depends on people's access to technology. If they even are in a position to be able to even use technology to gain that kind of information. So yeah, but I mean, I think the hope would be that it would move away from a more individual, more me sort of spectrum, and more to a collective spectrum. And I hope that the technology companies who are creating the services we use and rely on a day-to-day basis, that used to be more convenience driven, that used to be more, you know, sort of addictive, in order for them to take and rake as much data from us on our daily lives, so that they can sell to us better, so that they can sell to someone else.
I mean, I just had a wild thought, and we haven't talked about this, but I'm just thinking, like, if instead of scraping emails for seeing what someone wants to buy or a city they want to travel to, so then they can show you a cool hotel in that city that you just emailed your friend and said, I really want to go to Barcelona. So then you are on Instagram, and then an advertisement for a hotel in Barcelona pops up. That's kind of how all of our information is being hacked in order to kind of drive us and nudge us into certain directions to buy things. But what if they were scraping emails and text messages and seeing when people were expressing concerns about not having enough food? And so they sent groceries to that person's home, which they have their address because they probably, you know, have that information. Like, imagine if they use the tools that they have that they right now use to sell products, but instead of doing that, they were like, okay, that person is expressing concern to their friend that they don't have enough food in their house. Let's somehow get them groceries. Like, imagine if we took all these systems and we just redirected them to respond to real needs instead of to respond to cater to people who still have money to do things and buy things.
I'm just thinking out loud. That's really interesting. But like, just like riffing on that, what if, would it work if all of our data was, with our consent, open source, right? So for instance, a company like Google, right, who has access to almost every data that any data point that we can leak, right? Between Google, between Facebook, between Amazon, those companies alone, they are experts at extracting every data point about our life, you know, on the hour. So what if those extraction tools were able to be with the consent of whose data that is? So to be open source and like used as an API for other platforms who could take that data, do something live with that data to create a platform that does something like you're talking about. But the main difference would be is that the individual whose data that is would need to consent and say, I see what my live data is. Okay, this is my data. This is mine. First of all, it's not accurate. This isn't accurate, but this is, you know, and I can share with whomever I want and only with who I want and give permission to have a live feed to my data. And I know how they're using it, right? And they can't send it to third parties, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, we would need an entire legal system and we would need some sort of protocol. But just kind of blue sky, as you're saying, you know, how can, like, these companies who are experts at extracting data, how can we get access to our own data?
And like what Serena's asking, what will they do with all of this? And I think that's a big question, that it's like, will they try to alleviate it, or will they just be like, this is amazing, there's a crisis, we're getting more data than ever, we can like sell more certainty than ever, we can target better than ever? Like, I would really hope that that's not, that they're celebrating that. I mean,
it puts a lot of power in their hands, you know. So you, in a way, if you don't have like a legal framework around this, you probably have to be very careful about what you share. And also, I was thinking, you know, it would be wonderful to live in a world where we have free data to share. And so if someone is in need, technology can sort of identify that need and respond to that as quickly as possible. I mean, it would be wonderful. I don't know how realistic this could be, because, you know, human nature doesn't always go into that direction. But my hope is that technology would influence us to be more, you know, to focus more on the community rather than the self. So that's my hope towards technology. But in a way, I was also thinking when Ania was describing these hypothetical worlds where data is shared, how people could somehow play with technology and sort of trick technology and create fakes, you know, and alter the data in a way that could play against others and against the data itself. You know, sort of fighting the machine for no reason or for some reasons, I don't know. But I'll be curious also to have these questions sort of thrown to the audience as well and see what people are thinking, because it's very relevant, because what we definitely are going to see is that a huge amount of data is currently being collected, recorded, you know, these conversations, everything. And it would be interesting to see how technology companies and new business models will function around what we're currently experiencing. I don't have an answer to that, but I think, there's a lot of questions that can be raised around what's the role of technology and how do we want to see that? Do we want to see technology as something that helps us or as something that we should be afraid of because it definitely allows bigger company to be in control and influence us, in ways that we may or may not be aware of, to some extent.
Usually may not.
Yeah, and Eleonora just chimed in. She says, I don't agree with data sharing. I mean, consent is the key. Data treatment is so dangerous. And that's exactly the thing. I mean,
yeah, that's the whole point.
That's the thing. It's like, of course, all this data would be so helpful, but how, first of all, there's no consent. We don't even know what data we're providing.
We're not asked. We're currently not asked to not record this conversation, but it will be recorded. Yeah. Because Instagram will have it for 24 hours, and so it will be there, whether we want it or not.
100%. And the idea that, and this is why we are so vulnerable right now more than ever, is that we are now any person who was trying to have the most off the grid life as opt out to those who were trying to opt out of as many services as possible at this point may be left with no choice but to have to opt in to a terms and condition that they'll have
even
to
if
agree
to, even if they
even
disagree
if they,
with it.
Yeah, and so you say I consent, but it's like the consent is kind of like a tongue-in-cheek, where it's like you're consenting to all these things you're not signing up for.
But unless you don't want to speak to someone for 8 months, or not have a phone call, or not see someone's face that you're separated from physically, you don't really have many other alternatives.
But 100%, I agree with Eleonora, because what are the systems in place to protect us, to allow our consent to be respected? If we were even given consent, how would that be monitored? And the problem that I see, I mean, we've read a lot, a scholar, Jennifer Rothman, Shoshana Zuboff, who we've already mentioned. These are two scholars who are working in this area of, habeas data and data privacy and reasonable assumption of what private means, right? And these are people who are doing great thinking around this, and I'd be very interested to hear what they would have to say as well. But from what we've read, from what we've heard, which we've researched, it's been all about law, and law being what is going to allow this to be managed. But at the same time, technology is moving so much fast that law, how can law possibly keep up? Also, all of the companies who have, I think it was the resource of over 80% of data scientists are all on the roster of the major tech companies like Facebook, Google, Amazon. There is a
they buy everyone with that capability, so they can't really have people doing that kind of work for governments or for organizations that might challenge or really understand how deep they can go and be able to draft laws.
Law needs data scientists. Law needs, computer scientists who can work with the same tools that tech companies are using for these extractive technologies. And
but do it for people.
But if the talent pool is so much, taken up by the main companies, the main tech companies, it's like there isn't even just in the talent force. There's not enough to compete, you know. I mean, if that is the answer, it seems,
I totally agree with you, and I think the legal structure is also in a way meant to be like that, because if we consider like the big fives to be sort of controlling the data and the world in a way, it is in a sense accepted that law is always falling behind and not having enough resources. I think it's a system that is built that way and is wanted to be that way. We see it as wrong because, of course, we think about human rights and all that technology is doing to us. But in a way, I think it goes to their advantage. You know, it's meant to have a very separated class in how society is divided. You know, how the wealth is distributed. So that's why, you know, I think what we're living right now, it will make a lot of people question what they do every day. You know, why do I go to work every day? How come I live 8 hours a day in an office working for a company that is just draining all your energy and taking a lot from you? So I think, you know, a lot of people are going to think about the lifestyle and the way the systems are not really working to, you know, in favor of humans. So in a way, I feel we should all be in charge of ourselves and use technology to our own advantage. So being able to operate through technologies and learn about how these work and protect ourselves, you know, and ensure that technology is there to support us, not the other way around. Because I think a lot of tech companies is, you know, they are in control because they hold data, which is knowledge, is power, you know, is information, of course. But in a way, they're not untouchable. You know, what is happening right now is actually putting a lot of companies at stake. And I think that goes to our advantage and is our opportunity to be more in control.
I agree. And I think if we have the privilege to use technology to protect ourselves and to stay connected, then, as I said earlier, I think that what we can do is, I don't exactly know how, if any listeners have ideas, to put pressure on the people who are getting very valuable data, very diverse data, very large amounts of data out of this crisis, and everyone being so much more engaged in their digital life and digital communication, to be like, what are you doing with all of this excess? Like, how can we put pressure on these companies to do something positive with all of the information that they're getting from a lot of pain and suffering and a lot of loss around the world? Like, people shouldn't be cashing in on, you know, such a difficult and traumatic time in history. And I think if people realize that their increased data usage might be like making someone more money, if people realize that that was happening, then maybe there would be more widespread feeling of like, that's not right. How can we pressure them to use it for something that actually helps people who maybe can't advocate for themselves with technology, or they don't even have access? I think that's really important, and something that we as artists, designers, technologists, curators, I think that's something that everyone should be thinking about and just have on their radar.
And I think, good. I was just going to say, I think ownership over our own data bodies, you know, our digital self, that would, I think, change a lot.
Yeah.
Because once you can say, I own my own data.
You can also sell your own data.
You can sell your data. You can, if you know, you could sell your data. You could allow for your data not to be put into these systems that are the reason that companies are making money and making large profits. We were reading a lot about how
we read books at the same time. So
part of our
also separate, but sometimes
our
together.
constant R&D. How, you know, a lot of tech products, the actual function of the product, right, has nothing to do with the reason why that product exists, right? So, for instance, even like an entertainment app like Pokemon Go, right? Pokemon Go was a project by Alphabet, one of the Google like parent company, right? And that was a product that wasn't meant for entertainment so much as it was an experiment. And how do we take online interaction and put it into offline direction, offline predictable actions, right? So how can I get someone who is engaging in this game to go physically into a McDonald's or a Starbucks, and you put in the goal in there, right? The whole app wasn't to say, here's an entertainment
We want to
service.
provide entertainment and a fun game for everyone.
Yeah,
like, that wasn't the intention.
Yeah, it wasn't like PlayStation putting out like a game that you would play like on a console, you know. It was more for solely for seeing if we can drive online traffic to offline actions, right? So that is an example of a product that has existed, that has nothing to do, like the actual function of the product is sort of a side note, right? It's to collect all of that data. So as soon as they don't have control over how they can use that data without our consent, then it becomes a bit meaningless to them, right? So for the companies who have that in their possession. So I think ownership of your own data would do a lot, and it would open it up to say, I really need my data to go to this organization who's working in, you know, XYZ like area in my life that would, you know, be helpful, like healthcare or this particular issue within health. And that would do a lot. And it would also allow other companies who have, and other organizations who have an interest in helping people, who have an interest in using technology for community, to have data to do something with, right? To build those platforms.
Do you think that in the future, companies will be willing to reward users for their organic data? So do you see a world where we as humans may be earning from providing companies with data that we are willing to share with them?
I think that could happen. I mean, I think we're not there yet, but I feel like if...
Because for now, they're getting it for free.
Right, it's just kind of like a wide open like forest that you're like, I'm going to chop down all these trees. There's no law saying I can't. And it's right now, that's where we're at with this, is that there's just all this data, and it's like there's no law saying I can't take this, so I'm just going to get all of it that I can. But I think eventually that will be the case, that it's like, if it's worth it to you to have this much money a month for us to have access to what you do and you don't care, then you can get paid for them to have access to your information or your actions, and maybe that would be fine, but at least there's consent. I think the big problem isn't even data use. It's not how they use it to sell products. It's the fact that there's no consent from the person whose personal information and whose things that are supposedly, according to them, not private because they were shared on a platform. Although we all know, like, there's a lot of things. My Gmail, like, just because I typed it doesn't mean it's public. But I think eventually that would be the goal, is that major thing that's lacking right now, which is consent from the person whose data, thoughts, plans, anything typed, anything said around a device is just like territory for someone to take and use with zero consent. That's the problem. I think we will get to a point where it's like, I'm going to consent. You can listen to me with my Alexa. I don't have an Alexa. Don't like them. You can listen to me through this, you can whatever, and then you send me a check every month. Maybe that's fine, and people will decide to do it, but maybe not.
But also, not to make everything seem so not positive, but but no, when you say that, it's like those who have to sell their data, like those who don't need to sell their data. Let's start there.
Right.
Are
in a class problem.
Yeah, they're in a privileged position. So someone might have to exploit themselves and put themselves in a vulnerable situation
because they need that check more than they need their privacy. And then once again, we have like the privilege of being able to not need that income and able to stay private. So then you're able to buy your privacy, which is another like class issue.
So that needs to be addressed in the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Of the technology.
Or else it's
it would have to, and in law that would have to be addressed there.
If it's not,
I think,
then it's exploitation of the poor and working class by people who have money to just exploit their resources because they have no other way of getting money, which is something we can't ignore when we're trying to address these issues.
How do you think the enforcement of the GDPR has been, sort of going in support of individuals that had less control over that data? Because in a way, it has sort of framed legally what is possible to share, but it's also mean that, for example, where I also work, anybody can see the emails that I send to my colleagues if anyone requests to. So in a way, how do you see this kind of enforcement going in favor or not to individuals? I mean, I don't know much about how it works over in the US.
Can you explain more about this, what you're speaking about? Because I'm not super
Oh,
familiar.
okay, sure. Is a recent law enforcement that was circulated in Europe before Christmas, so I think it was around October, and it's called GDPR, which goes in protection of privacy. So if you, for example, are in an office space and you leave documents or any sensible data around, you will need to shred it. And the same goes on digital data, so you cannot really keep or store documents on shared drive. So anything that is like on Google Drive or something like that, and it's got data around your customers or people, address, phone numbers, needs to be protected in a way.
And so it's on the employees and the employers to make sure that internally they're shredding things.
Anyone really, any sensible data that you're not allowed to share, it shouldn't be left, for
so it's kind
anyone
of like
to access.
And stuff.
Is there any sort of enforcement there that is similar to this?
I mean, I feel like there's been things that have tried to be initiated, and I mean, I haven't read anything that says that there's been a large improvement on our end. I'm not sure.
Okay, no, sure. I was only curious to know if something similar was in a way adopted as well over there, and the differences, because I think every country is slightly different, so it's a bit weird that you're traveling to one country and then some laws apply, and then you travel to another country and then you've got other kind of freedoms or restrictions. So I found it quite fascinating what you can or cannot do just by moving.
Yes. I know that the US is extremely behind and lax, and I don't know if that's because of the lobby of a lot of the tech companies being based here, that every time something is brought up to address this issue, that you have a lobby or huge tech companies that are making sure that nothing that would inhibit their operations or their ability to get data would be smashed immediately before it can take effect, or even be written about, or even have the general population learn about it and be like, wait, what do they want to do? Wait, why do they want to stop that? And then start asking questions that bring people to oh, that kind of sounds messed up. So I don't know if that's for sure. My guess is that there is probably a lot of resistance in the US because of most of those kind of surveillance capitalist tech giant companies being based here and having a kind of stronghold
to sort
on
of
our
protect
ecosystem
them, perhaps,
from being able to make anything that would minimize or jeopardize their profits. So
it looks like California passed its own equivalent to GDPR in 2008, California Consumer Privacy Act in 2018.
So maybe it's being addressed state by state, but federally, I don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
And how? Yeah, no worries. And how do you think, I think, for concluding this conversation, and if anyone watching wants to share any questions or thoughts, please feel free to. Something I wanted to touch on and maybe sort of conclude with is, how do you think your practice will be informed of what we're currently experiencing, and how would you bring such experience into your work?
I mean, I think as we touched on earlier in the conversation, with anything that's going to be opened once people are able to leave their homes, our next project is set to open in New York. We don't know now what that date will be, but when we imagine the context of people have been quarantined, dealing with maybe loss of family and friends, financial stress, and just a whole range of emotional difficulties. And changes and how we've learned to interact with people, or losing our ability to interact with people. You know, like we don't know what that's going to be like, but I think initially when we're going to be making that concept, I think first and foremost, unlike On View, which was kind of like everything is fantasy on the outside, and then come in here and we're trying to like show people something real, maybe not super pleasant, but something that we think is important. In this case, I think more than we would have if this didn't happen, we would be thinking about how our work or experiences that we design can help heal or help people transition from being in a quarantine situation into kind of whatever that new normal looks like. So I think from my perspective, and feel free to add on this, I just think a hypersensitivity to the conditions that people are going to be in emotionally, physically, and kind of what we're going to need to do to repair as a society and support each other. I think we'll have more of that approach than trying to teach people something, or like, here's about data, you should care about this, but more like soft and more sensitive, and then also still trying to work to raise awareness about issues with data, especially how they can be exploited at this time.
Yeah, there's something that Leonora shared here, and she's saying that in the US, data from Google and Facebook is used to locate people and to see about and to check on their respective quarantine. So they are currently using our data. And I know there's been apps that have been developed to self-locate yourself or others, and to report any symptoms, so that people are tracked in a way, so that others can be safe, and also yourself. So, you know, it's interesting to see that something like this, probably 2 months before all of this happened, we probably would have looked at it and thinking, this is mad, this is completely crazy, you know, we wouldn't want this to happen. But today, you can use such technologies to yes, protect yourself and others, you know, so the tracking of people. Of course, it's scary, and I totally agree on Leonora's point that, you know, we are used and others are in control of our movements and data. But in a way, do you think companies are doing this to really protect communities, or maybe not?
I don't know. Is CCTV being used to make sure people are not violating their quarantine?
Well, I know that, for example, in Italy, there's helicopters going around, definitely in Rome, checking if there's anybody on the streets and giving fine to people if they are found outside without a reason or without, you know, paperwork that states why they had to go outside. So I'm not sure about CCTVs. I would say probably yes. But I'm definitely aware of apps that have been developed that you can track, you know, self-locate yourself or others, and identify yourself or others as, you know, with symptoms, to sort of see the spreading of the virus, because tests are lacking, and also it's difficult for the states to provide data, you know, that gets published every day. So they are getting developers to support communities in self-identifying themselves, like, for example, is happening in South Korea. And that's why, you know, that there's been a lot of cases have been monitored more closely, and there's less deaths. So in a way, technology is helping although it's violating a lot of privacy.
Yeah, I think that's another thing, is that in a crisis, even, I mean, while everyone's talking about the virus, we always have to remember that the news, it doesn't necessarily tell you what to think, but it tells you what to think about. And it kind of like, I always, when there's something that's being covered nonstop, there is such a potential for things to go unnoticed or bills to be passed that no one's talking about because they're so busy tracking the deaths. So I think that's another thing that it's important that people remember, like, we're told what to think about, but we also need to be aware of how emergency situations can allow us to become maybe too lax on the rights that we are giving up in the name of protection, and wondering who they're coming from. I mean, are they coming from Donald Trump? Like, is he really looking to protect us, or is he probably using this to accomplish something else that's like not being discussed?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can.
That's a big question. Yes.
Yeah, and I think you can be helpful, and a company can be helpful and destructive all in one brushstroke, right? Just like as a super basic example, I need to send an email, and I can't say I can't afford to have my own, service platform to send an email. I'm going to use a free service like Gmail, right? If I use Gmail, it's like, it's helping me. It makes that process easy. If I'm trying to get, I'm trying to connect with you over WhatsApp, I can do that with free of cost, and it's something that I need, and it's solving that problem, right? But it's not. But that it can also be solving a problem at the same time be using against me, right? So I mean, the same thing with like,
they only work because they do something good, but then there's an underside that you often don't know about. But it's not always all evil, like you're saying. They do something also helpful. Yeah,
I mean, like all of the polls or symptom provide all the polls and surveys that have been monitoring. Okay, take this survey. We'll tell you if these symptoms like amount to you being tested positive. That is helpful in itself, but what else is being done with that information? So it can be both. I think in the same way.
There's a lot of food for thoughts on this, and I think everyone is going to be more mindful about what we share online. Anyways, it's been such a great conversation, really profound.
Thank you.
Always nice talking to you, Serena.
Yeah, thank you. I'm mindful that now Instagram is gonna probably close a live.
Oh, okay. So we should
say because that's what happened to me the other day. When it reached 1 hour, it just stopped.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just worried about that, and I really wanted to say thank you for taking the time to talk to me, and for everyone watching and contributing to this chat. It was, good in a way to talk about these out loud, and think about the work that you've done and how technology will be present in your work, but under probably a different lens.
Yes, definitely. 100%. Thank you, Serena, and thanks everyone who joined us.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you so much. Ciao, guys. Take care. Stay in touch. Bye. Bye.